Think about the last time you filled up your car, paid your mortgage, bought groceries. Every one of those prices in every country on earth is shaped by a single currency. Not because the world voted for it, not because it's the strongest or the fairest, but because of one decision made in secret on a single weekend in 1971. Every country on earth, from Germany to Ghana, from Japan to Brazil, operates inside a financial system they did not design, cannot fully escape, and do not control. At the center of that system, one currency, one country's currency. This is not a conspiracy. It is not a theory. It is the documented, verifiable architecture of the modern financial world, and almost nobody has explained how it actually works. This is the story of the invisible prison, how it was built, how it became a tool of power, and why, for the first time in 50 years, the world is quietly building alternatives. Now, if the dollar is no longer backed by gold, what keeps the world using it? August 15th, 1971, Sunday night, 9 p.m. Richard Nixon sits in front of a television camera. 70 million Americans are watching. The rest of the world will find out in the morning. To understand what happens next, you need to understand the deal the world made after World War II. 44 nations, one agreement. Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, 1944. Every currency on earth would be pegged to the US dollar, and the US dollar would be backed by gold, $35 per ounce. Fixed, guaranteed. If you held dollars, you held something with a real anchor. But by 1971, America faced a serious economic problem. It had been spending heavily. Vietnam, the space race, the cost of maintaining a global superpower. The US was issuing dollars faster than its gold reserves could support. France noticed first. France began converting its dollar holdings back to gold, physically shipping gold bars from New York to Paris. Other nations watched. Some followed. The pressure on American gold reserves was growing. Nixon faced a genuinely difficult choice: reform spending, rebuild reserves, or suspend the gold convertibility agreement to stabilize the dollar. He chose the third option. On that Sunday night, with no prior international consultation, Nixon announced that the dollar would no longer be convertible to gold. It was one of the most consequential financial decisions in modern history. The world woke up Monday morning holding a currency no longer anchored to a physical asset, backed instead by confidence in the United States economy. French Finance Minister Valéry Giscard d'Estaing already had a phrase for America's structural advantage in the global system: the exorbitant privilege. The answer is infrastructure so deeply embedded in global finance that replacing it would take decades. The system has a name most people have never heard: SWIFT, the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. Founded 1973, headquartered in Belgium, technically an international cooperative, governed by member banks across the world. In practice, the central nervous system of global finance. Every cross-border bank transfer, every international payment, every time money moves between countries, it is coordinated through SWIFT. By 2022, SWIFT connected over 11,500 financial institutions across more than 200 countries, processing 44 million messages every single day. 44 million times a day, the world's money moves through one coordinated system. And because the dollar is the dominant currency in that system, any institution processing dollar transactions must ultimately connect to American financial infrastructure. that connection can be suspended, not with force, through financial and regulatory mechanisms. In 2012, following international sanctions coordinated between the US and EU, Iranian banks were disconnected from SWIFT. Iran's ability to conduct international trade collapsed almost overnight, without a single military action. The world watched, and every finance ministry on Earth quietly updated its risk assessments. February 2022, Russia invades Ukraine. The international response was swift and coordinated, but one element of that response sent a signal nobody had expected. Within days, the US, EU, UK and allies froze approximately $300 billion of Russia's foreign currency reserves. Reserves held in financial institutions across New York, London, Brussels and Tokyo. Decades of accumulated sovereign savings, frozen, inaccessible by coordinated international decision. Russia was simultaneously disconnected from SWIFT. The ruble fell more than 30% in the weeks that followed. But here is what the news cycle missed entirely. Every finance minister, every central bank governor, every sovereign wealth fund manager on the planet watched what happened to Russia's reserves. And many of them privately asked the same question. If a G20 nation's reserves can be frozen this quickly, what does that mean for ours? The dollar had always been trusted as the world's neutral reserve currency. After February 2022, many nations began treating it as something else. Not a safe store of value, a geopolitical variable. What happened next didn't make front pages. It happened in central banks and treasury departments. Quietly, methodically, the world began diversifying away from dollar dependence. China had been developing an alternative payment infrastructure for years. After 2022, it accelerated. CIPS, the Cross-Border Interbank Payment System, a parallel network for processing international transactions outside dollar clearing infrastructure. Russia expanded its own domestic system, SPFS. After the SWIFT disconnection, domestic Russian payments continued largely without interruption. Then came the gold. Central banks collectively bought more gold in 2023 than in any year since 1967. The World Gold Council confirmed total gold demand hit a record 4,974 tons in 2024. This is not speculation. This is documented reserve management. Nations building a buffer. China accumulated 538 metric tons of physical gold while reducing its US Treasury holdings from $1.3 trillion in 2013 to $756 billion by 2025. And the reserve currency data tells a consistent story. In 2001, the dollar made up 73% of global foreign exchange reserves. By 2016, 65%. By 2025, approximately 58%. Still dominant, still the world's leading reserve currency by a wide margin, but declining every year steadily. Here is the number that puts everything into perspective. Today, the dollar is involved in 89% of all foreign exchange transactions on Earth. 89%. When a company in South Korea pays a supplier in Brazil, they convert through dollars. When a factory in Vietnam buys components from Germany, dollars. When a government services its international debt, dollars. The world uses the dollar, not because it has no choice in theory, but because building a credible alternative takes decades, and no alternative currently comes close. But here is the structural question that economists are quietly debating. America's national debt has passed $36 trillion. It grows by approximately $1 trillion every 100 days. That level of debt is manageable as long as global demand for dollars remains strong, as long as the world needs dollars to function. The dollar's dominance and America's ability to finance its debt are connected. That connection is what makes the long-term decline in reserve share worth watching carefully. Nixon made a difficult decision in 1971 to stabilize the American economy. It worked remarkably well for 50 years. The system that emerged from that decision became the foundation of global trade, global finance, and global growth for every country on Earth, including yours. The question now is not whether the dollar will remain dominant tomorrow. The question is whether the system built in 1971 is still fit for a world that looks very different from the one it was designed for. That question doesn't have an answer yet, but the fact that central banks, governments, and financial institutions around the world are quietly asking it should tell you something. If you want to understand the hidden rules of money and power, you are already in the right place.